before we go any further and talk about the toolkit, I want to invite Professor Tim Lenton to come and say a few words. So, Tim is the founding director of the Global Systems Institute at the University of Exeter and chair in climate change and earth system science, and has been pioneering this research into tipping points for many years. Without his work, none of what we've done would have been possible. And he's also got a book that came out last week called Positive Tipping Points. So clearly knows a lot about the work that we are doing. And Tim, thank you for coming. Lovely to hear your thoughts.
Thanks, Peter. Big thank you to you and the huddle and everyone who's put the toolkit together because, well, I've got some, whilst I might share some ideas, this is all about putting it into practice, which is what kind of motivates me. So, yeah, I will share a few slides just to kind of land the positive tipping points concept. But yeah, really excited to see this process happening and to see what is it, over 200 of you eager to engage and put the tools into practice. I often invite an audience to start thinking about tipping points by leaning back on their chair we've all done that at some point to experiment with, there's a point at which a balance point at which a small nudge one way or the other is going to make a big difference to your fate or state, because you and the chair are like a system with two alternative stable states, and you can tip from one to the other. And when the change starts going, it's self-propelling, as you all know. And this is a slightly more subtle little movie I'm running where we're forcing some system in a way that made the state it was in less stable or less resilient over time until it tipped from blue to red in like an abrupt and hard to reverse and self-propelling way out of the valley that had disappeared into another state. I suppose it would be like melting the back legs of a chair with a blowtorch, assuming they were made out of metal. But we know that we're in a situation with some incumbent ways of doing things and systems that have damping feedbacks that try to maintain the status quo, but that change can be transformative and propelled by amplifying feedbacks within a system. And the toolkit, as well as my work, is all about, well, what are the actions and interventions we can take to kind of, well, you could say to do two things. You want to, if there's my proposition that I'm sure I don't have to convince you of is that we're in an unsustainable state of societies and economies, but there is another, or at least one other sustainable state we can imagine that would have its own damping feedbacks, maintaining the valley or the status quo. The trick is we could work on, well, both on can we weaken the damping feedbacks that maintain the fossil fuels status quo? And can we also work with the amplifying feedbacks that can propel change? And the story from existing case studies that actions can do both those things. They can weaken the status quo and they can work with amplifying feedbacks that ultimately can positively tip societies and our relationship with nature, etc. Into a more sustainable state. And the beauty of it is once the change gets going, if the amplification is strong enough that it can become self-propelling. We've seen that kind of tipping point change with the UK tipping away from coal burning and power generation. That's the black line here. It was 40% of our electricity supply in 2012 fell off a cliff. Without going into all the details, the specific policy that triggered the tipping point was instigated because of the UK's Climate Change Act, which started life as a private member's bill, which existed because of decades of environmental activism in the UK. So these things have interesting and varied histories, but social activism is often at the root of positive tipping points. And you could say the same for the Norwegian car market, having tipped in the last decade wholesale from petrol and diesel cars to electric ones. That story starts in the late 1980s with a group of environmental activists, including famous members of the pop band a-ha, coming up with a 9-point policy package to incentivize EVs and fighting for over a decade to get policy to adopt it. So yeah, there are many actually instances of positive tipping points that I and friends and colleagues are busy trying to document. And I started playing last week with putting some instances of where positive tipping has started or been particularly fast, if you like, on a map here for like positive tipping points in what you might call the energy system, including the UK and Norway up at the top, but lots of other instances, including some really exciting stuff going on in the majority world with the rapid spread of electrified two and three wheelers like in East Africa or India, off-grid solar power bringing electricity to people who've never had it in sub-Saharan Africa and so forth. There's also a whole lot of evidence for positive tipping points in nature and our interface with it in farming and fishing, which is encouraging, and what some of which are dotted on this map. And I think partly, I guess maybe this helps a toolkit as well. What I'm working on is trying to help document instances of where positive tipping points have happened, so we can all learn from it with you and with other colleagues. Um, when we first started thinking about this, it was kind of clear that you could imagine different phases of activity. Um, you have to do some work usually to do what I call create the enabling conditions for the positive tipping point to sort of shallow the valley, if you like. And then you might, as scientists like me, have got some ways we can sense if a system's close to positive tipping. And then there's some actions that can be most effective at triggering the tipping, which once it gets going, the beauty of it is, it creates a disproportionate bang for your buck, if you like. But the story is anyway, there are many different agents of change can help drive the transformation. And actually, if they can start to coordinate in begrudgingly or otherwise between the different, we call them actor groups, including civil society at large as key, then things really get singing. Then the change can really get self-propelling, especially when all sorts of bottom-up action starts to connect with top-down policy, regulation, and the rest of it. Recently, I've been nerding it out and published a paper where we do the kind of a version of how do you tell if there's a positive tipping point in your system that you want to transform, and if you think that there is, how can you tell how close it is? How can you tell what actions would bring it forward? Which are more effective than others, etc. And really, I think the toolkit is about making that as accessible and actionable as possible for everybody who want to get on board with this, the transformative change that I think we all know we need. We're going way too slowly in tackling the climate and nature crisis or emergency. Succeeding slowly is basically the same as failing because we then still face unmanageable, I'd say existential risks. So yeah, thanks for all being here. Thanks to Peter and the huddle again for taking this kind of big picture thinking and making it accessible and actionable for all of you. Really excited to see what users of the toolkit come up with.